The trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd is underway in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Chauvin is charged with second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter in the death of George Floyd. Floyd died in May 2020 after Chauvin placed his knee on Floyd's neck. His final moments were recorded on video, and it led to widespread protests against police brutality and racism. To discuss this and more, we're joined live by Chairman of the Crestmount International MFH, Bishop R.H. Kelly, and geopolitical security expert Bradley Stein. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for your time tonight. I'll begin with you, Bishop Kelly. It's been said that there are two trials that are, unfolding here. One is inside the courtroom where, the defense has got to really prove its case, but another one is taking place outside in the court of public opinion, where the U.S. has to prove that justice for a black man who was under arrest, who died under arrest, can really be attained. Do you agree?
Yeah, most certainly. And I guess the trial outside of the courtroom is probably just as important as the one inside the courtroom. Because we've been in the courtroom on these occasions many times. In the case of Rodney King, 30 years ago, same situation, excessive abuse by white police officers that beat him almost to death. And he actually just died a few years ago. But it was sort of the same kind of scene. And so at the end of the day, the real question outside of the courtroom is justice really blind, or does justice have a view about who is just and who is not?
And Bradley, I'd like to bring you in right on that point, because you are someone who also took part in these protests, especially when, a lot of these injustices continue to emerge. Is justice really blind in the United States?
It has been for many years. Like the Reverend said, systemic racism within the police force has been there for many years. You go as far back as, Emmett Till to Breonna Taylor getting killed, and so many more people in the African American community in the United States. So, for a black man or woman to walk down the street and see a police cruiser ride by, they are fearful of that. But, we have to change, and we have to break this once and for all. And, stop this racist behavior with, within police stations and police unions. And, we really need to, train police officers a lot better to deal with these situations, because it's out of control. Like the Reverend mentioned, Rodney King's murder and the whole of Los Angeles, basically was set on fire because people were just so outraged. And now with what happened to Breonna Taylor and George Floyd has brought the same type of mass action outdoors. And, but, it's got to give.
And Bradley, when really one looks at what has been happening really inside court, quite startling, evidence is emerging, and the defense also just trying to just poke holes, in some instances not very successful. Do you think that things may be shifting a little bit, that the scale may be tilting towards justice at some point?
Let's hope so. And I think a very positive step has been with, the former police supervisor, I stand to be corrected, stating that, Chauvin's standard operational procedures were incorrect, and that, once Mr. Floyd was in handcuffs, that, he he shouldn't have continued to press down on his neck and squeeze the life out of him. It was, you know, beyond cruel and vicious and, you know, not acceptable.
And Bishop Kelly, there's been requests, you know, from some when, as we continue to watch reports around this trial continue to unfold, there's been requests for the jurors to separate race issues and their feelings about Chauvin from what the prosecutors can prove as evidence in court. Is this really that simple?
Of course it's not, because as long as your jurors are raised in our society in the United States, as long as your jurors have seen this from generations to generations, and it's sad. We just had a scene last week where 8 people were killed in a shopping center. They were Asians, and the first thing the public begins to talk about is the fact that the person who did the assailant was suffering perhaps from some mental illness. Had that been a black man, they would have been talking about whether or not he got the death penalty or whether or not he went to jail for life. It wouldn't have mattered what his mental state was. And until white people and black people can look at one another as people, I believe it's not going to make a difference what happens in the courtroom. Mm-hmm. You could talk to some of our grandmothers in America today, and they would
all right.
Killing a black man.
And Bishop, you know, one of the things that you mentioned there is the importance of a change in mindset. But certainly this particular trial is also going to play in the debate around, you know, police reform. Certainly something that really needs to be accelerated at this point.
Police work for society. I think we need a societal reform and not just a police reform. You know, police get hired by people. They just don't take the offices by themselves. I think we as a people, now this applies to South Africa, America, Europe, wherever it is, wherever we're dealing with this thing of race. And it's a global thing, not just America. It's a global thing. Until we can begin to look at people and like people and have decent conversations, because we're all civilized people. Let's have a conversation about this thing. It really must be deeper than just the fact that I'm black and you're white. It can't be that basic, you know. It can't be that rustic. It must be something else. Let's find out what it is. Let's talk to people. I believe that's the key.
And Bradley, do you agree with that? Because what Bishop is saying is that it's got to be deeper than, you know, black and white, talking and societal reform, because police officers are hired by people. Do you agree that that is an approach that could help in this particular debate?
I couldn't agree with the Reverend more. You know, he is spot on. It boils down to humanity and humility. And it boils down to, you know, we are all the same. Culturally, we might have differences. So what? You know, we different, and, you know, we don't even get on with people within our own cultures. It doesn't matter. We just need to look past that and just accept the fact that, you know, we are all humans, and, you know, we need to stand up and fight for each other, like the people that came out at the Black Lives Matter march for George Floyd in Los Angeles. And you know, what I saw, the unity over there was so inspiring and so encouraging until, you know, the police overstepped their boundaries.
And Bradley, the defense has been trying to paint a picture of a George Floyd who may have been high on opioid at the time, and also with cardiac conditions and an adrenaline that may have contributed to this, and thus trying to move away from how Chauvin placed his knee on his neck and saying that that may not have necessarily been that moment, you know, that could have been responsible for him taking his last breath, but certainly the use of drugs, the, you know, cardiac issues may have coupled this particular incident that shocked the entire globe. What do you say to that? How did you react when you were watching that testimony?
I have been fortunate enough to be around the law enforcement, the defense, and intelligence community for many, many years. And you can see the difference between whether somebody's just executing their role within administering public safety and law enforcement. What Mr. Chauvin did that day was not in any manuals or standard operational procedures. The man just wanted to put the hurt on him, and it was the cruelest and most inhumane, one of the most inhumane things I've ever seen. And for him to just simply put his hands in his pocket while this man's saying, "I can't breathe," as far as I'm concerned, I wish there was the death penalty for this guy.
Bishop, the moments "I can't breathe" and these words "I can't breathe" have really reverberated across the globe, and certainly are not going to go away anytime soon, as a lot more activists are really outraged at what happened here.
Yes, as my colleague said, and which I think is rather interesting, the fact that they bring up the issues of his medical past, and I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah, the mere fact that they bring up his medical condition. Well, the thing about it is, he's a black man in America at a very difficult time. Medical conditions do happen. I dare anybody to want who's not black in America back for a week, maybe even a day, and let's see whether or not they would end up on any kind of medications or opioids. The thing about it is, I was reading just recently, it's twice as hard for African Americans to live in America than anyone else. And I think the end result of that is you do end up with some medical conditions, a shorter lifespan, a different kind of medical history that's not only your history, it's generational. Your father had it, your grandfather had it, your grandmother had it. And so it's kind of interesting that they would bring that up kind of cheaply to say that he's just like any other man. There's no reason why he should be taking opioids. Well, I think it's perhaps morally wrong to take opioids. But then again, what's morality when you live in the kind of society where you're not respected as a whole person? So I would never judge Mr. Floyd on that basis. I would base it on the fact of whether or not this police officer at that particular time had the right to take his life or give it. Because I think that only belongs to God. And I don't think God puts us in any position or any power to say, it's my right to take his life. And regardless of what might have been a contributing factor, is at the time that George Floyd died, this man was standing on his neck and blocking his artery, that breath. A difficult time for me as well.
Certainly, Bishop. And Bradley, as we round up this discussion, you're someone that has, really watched security issues very closely. You yourself have been part of some protests. Let's talk then, as we end off this discussion, about what exactly is stopping police officers, in fact, some officers in the United States. What is stopping them from understanding how to deal with issues of crowd control? Because as Bishop says, it's not a problem that is only unique to the United States. Here at home, we also are experiencing it.
Well, again, it boils down to training, and it boils down to, making sure that, police officers and people that deal with with crowds or any sort of enforcing of the law have the mental capacity to do so and are mentally fit, I should rather say, to do so. If they have anger issues and if they've been reprimanded in the past, these things need to be addressed. And it boils down to, and now I'll use South Africa as an example. For the World Cup soccer, South Africa, to be prepared from a security point of view, hired thousands and thousands of police officers. Those police officers, are now, years later, after the World Cup soccer, perhaps finding themselves in roles where they are dealing with protests, etc. We all know how broken the South African police is, and we know that very often there's a lack of efficient and professional standards within in the training and the execution of dealing with crowds. Firstly, projectiles should be done away with, in my opinion, both here and in the United States. As we've seen in South Africa, one of our young black protesters actually lost his life and was killed by a projectile. And as you know, and I was shot with a rubber projectile and was gravely injured. So I'm trying to push for change and a justice reform so that police don't have immunity from prosecution, and so that the police don't use rubber projectiles and hurt people.
All right. Thank you so much to you both for this discussion. We are indeed watching the trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin unfold there in Minneapolis, and certainly, we'll bring you those developments as they continue to unfold. That was Chairman of Crest Mountains National, MFH, Bishop R.H. Kelly, and geopolitical security expert Bradley Steyn. Thank you so much to you both.